So I'm going to introduce our speaker. We'll do our 3 bows, and our speaker will begin his talk. So our speaker today is the Venerable Samiddha. Venerable Samiddha, aka Venerable Falun, was born in Medan, Indonesia. In 2014, he studied Buddhism at the Fuyan Buddhist Institute in Taiwan. In 2015, he joined the monastic under the guidance of Venerable Ekayana in Malaysia. In 2018, he graduated from the Fuyan Buddhist Institute as the best graduate of his class. After graduating, he actively preached and taught Buddhism in Indonesia and Malaysia. From 2019 to 2023, he came to Houston to pursue his academic studies in philosophy and religion. At the same time, he assisted the Texas Buddhist Association in conducting various religious services and delivering Dharma talks. Now he is attending graduate school at the University of Washington in Seattle, conducting study and research in Buddhist studies. His expertise include early Buddhist manuscripts, the history of Indian Buddhism, meditation, philology, and philosophy. One of his mottos is to live your life wholly and entirely with all the bitterness and sweetness, for the next life is so mysterious. If everyone will please stand, we'll do our 3 bows. We'll do 3 bows to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And 1 bow to our speaker today, Venerable Samiddha. Thank you all very much. Y'all can be seated. And it's all yours, Samiddha.
Okay, thank you. So good morning all. Before we begin, let us recite first to pay homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. All right. So today's topic is still the same, the continuity of the Buddhist scholastic tradition from the Northern tradition. And today we are going to learn about the 7 books of Abhidharma. So basically the nature of this talk is about Abhidharma Pitaka. So if you all know about the 3 Pitaka or the 3 baskets or the Bibles of Buddhism, we have Sutra, Vinaya, and Abhidharma. And we are on this 3rd one, which is Abhidharma. And there are many Abhidharmas in Buddhism. The one that we are going to focus is the Northern tradition one. Previously, you might have seen this in the previous talks, but you might have forgotten it. So here I present to you again the whole schema of School of Buddhism and their Abhidharmas. And these all schools are all branched out from the same main school called, in the red one, Sthaviravada. Right? Sthaviravada is the teaching of the elder. And the other big branch, which is not on the screen, is the Mahasanghika, which is the ancestor of Mahayana, so to speak. And if you look at the green one, that is the one that we are going to focus on today, which is the subdivision called Sarvastivadin, and they have 7 books of Abhidharma. They were from the Northern tradition. But you also have the 7 southern books in purple, which is from the Theravada tradition. And I want to mention first in the very beginning that all the Sarvastivadin, all the 7 books of Abhidharma within this Northern tradition agree on one thing, namely Sarvasti. So the Sanskrit name Sarvastivadin by itself means Sarva is all or everything, and Asti is exist, and Vadin is the teaching or the speak. So Sarvastivadin is the teaching that says everything exists, quote unquote. And starting from now on, you'll hear me saying this sentence again and again, again and again, because the whole main core point of Sarvastivada in school is that everything exists. So it's kind of very, very different from what you might be familiar with, which is the notion of emptiness, or if you still remember my talk before this talk, right? It's about Diamond Sutra and Heart Sutra, right? In those talks, we were talking about everything is empty. But then here we arrive at the notion of everything exists, which is very opposite to the emptiness. So every single dharma exists. They have their own self nature. That's the core point in the whole Northern Abhidharma. So we are not going to say emptiness here. There's nothing empty anymore here, but everything exists, which is more preferable for some people. So the 7 books of Northern Abhidharma is often called one body and with 6 feet. It's quite a strange creature here, but it's just a simile or metaphor to talk about. The one body is called the Jnana Prasthana, or the foundation of knowledge. So this is the main book here that the other 6 depend on, although it might not be the first. It's about abstract principle of organization, right? And then we're not going to stay very long on this list because we'll learn about the content one by one. So the first book or the second book, depending on whether you count the body or not, Sangiti Paryaya, or Discourse on Collective Recitation. This is a commentary of Sangiti Sutra. So the first book of Abhidharma here acts as a commentary for the sutra. So the Sangiti Sutra, which we'll see later on, it's about listing all the Dharma, ordering from number 1 to 10. So there are 1 Dharma, there are 2 Dharmas, 3 Dharmas, and so on up to 10. The second book, Dharmaskanda, or the Compendium of Dharmas, is excerpts from various sutras topically arranged with commentary on each. So pretty similar to Sangiti. The one is ordered based on number, and Dharmaskanda is ordered based on the topic. The third one, Prajñapti, or Manual of Concepts, it focuses on cosmological speculation and examines topics of the world's action, causation, and reasons. So pretty hardcore in nature kind of book. The fourth one, Dhatukaya, Compendium of Elements. It analyzes mental processes, enumeration of mental components or thought concomitants or cetasika in Pali. And then the fifth one, we have Prakarana Pada. It's about literary exposition. Basically, it's a compilation from an independent source with other chapters. The beginning of the 5-fold taxonomy of all factors that we see last week begins from this book, number 5. So we have form, thought, concomitants, dissociated forces, and unconditioned factors, the table, if you still remember. Number 6 is Vijnanakaya, Compendium of Consciousness. It's a more mature taxonomy or matrix of categories for the specification of factors, particularly those factors that function in the path of religious practice. All right. So the 7 books of Abhidharma from the Northern tradition are these 7, 1 body and 6 feet. And then from the 7 books, it developed into what we call in Sanskrit Vibhasa, or compendium, which consists of many treatises. But the representation is called Mahavibhasa Sastra, which is translated as the Great Compendium. We'll talk in detail about this book in our next talk, which is next month. And then Vibhasa Compendium presents the views of the 7 books, right? So this is kind of the development. And then we arrive at a very, very famous book called Abhidharmakosha Bhashya. It's very famous in the Chinese tradition, even in the Tibetan tradition today. It summarizes the Vibhasa views and then comments on and often criticizes them. It criticizes the Sarvastivada Vaibhasika's views from the Sautrantika perspective. So this is all about the school of Buddhism presenting their own view, criticizing, defending, commenting, and go on like that. So Abhidharmakosa is the most famous book in the Northern tradition. It holds a position equal to, if you know about Southern tradition, Abhidharma, represented by Abhidhamata Sangha from the Southern tradition. It consists of the essence of Northern Abhidharma thought, although not necessarily a compilation of the 7 books. Most of the time, the Kosha is just not agreeing with the all the 7 books or the Vivasa. It has its distinct view. Okay, so if we look at the stage of development, of course, first we begin with simple expository or the nature is commentary, commenting on what the sutras say. There are 2 books in our 7 books, the first and the second one from the Northern tradition. And then from the Southern tradition, which they also have 7 books, it's called Vibhanga. And then we have in the proper India school called Sariputra Abhidharma. And then it moves on to the abstract principle of organization. We have the body here, our jnana prasthana. And then we arrive at the polemical text, which is more dense, a lot of contents in it, not just summarizing. And then lastly, we have dialectical expository, which is a debate, books about debate. And they are represented by these books. And 2 of them, as you can see, are Abhidharmakosha Bhashya and Nyaya Nusara. So this is interesting. Usually the standard kind of debate is always among these 3 books. So we have Mahavibhasa Sastra, which is our base for the Northern Abhidharma. So this is the basis for all the Northern Abhidharma tradition, the conservative view. And then we have Abhidharma Kosha, which is kind of criticizing the conservative view of Sarvastivada or of the Northern tradition, even though itself is the Northern tradition. And then we have Nyaya Nusara, which is kind of try to defend Mahavibhasa point of view. So Nyaya Nusara is kind of representing the view of Mahavibhasa correctly and criticizing Abhidharma Kosha. So if you take a look at this whole schema, we know that none of them is really the words of the Buddha. None of them are really the representative of the Northern Abhidharma. None of them is more correct or more wrong. They just keep going on in debate and defending their own view. Okay, an example from our second book, Dharmaskanda, which I picked the excerpt from the chapter 7, right effort. It's about the 4 dharmas. So it says in the Abhidharma, it says there are 4 right efforts. What are the 4? You all might have known these 4 right efforts, right? So the first one is to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. So 2 main components here are very important: the unwholesome states and the reason, the unwholesome states that have arisen. And then the second one is to prevent unwholesome states that have not arisen, right? And then the third one is to arouse wholesome states that have yet arisen. In other words, that have unarisen. And then the fourth one is to maintain the wholesome states that have already arisen, right? So the right effort is kind of the exertion, the one that we have to strive for in our practice of Buddhism, in our spiritual life, in which we kind of keep what is good in our life and abandon what is bad in our life and during our practice. The way this Abhidharma differ from the sutra is by the content. So the four right efforts is basically the same: to abandon, to prevent, to develop or arouse, and to maintain or to protect. But then what is different here is the content of what is to be abandoned, prevented, aroused, and maintained. So the Dharma Skandha here has the content of 5 hindrances as the representation of unwholesome states. And it has 4 absorptions and 3 formless samadhi, which all are basically the jhana state or the meditative absorption states as the good or wholesome states. So, and then further on, we see what are the 5 hindrances. This, you might have been familiar with these contents if you practice meditation, because these are the kind of the hindrances, the obstacles that we often face when we do meditation, right? The first one is sensual desire, and then we have ill will. These two are like the first 2 poisons in Buddhism. We have our desire and hatred. And then the third one is the most concrete and obvious example of hindrances when you practice meditation, which is sloth and torpor, kind of laziness, sleepiness kind of thing. The fourth one is the opposite of the third one: restlessness and worry. Your mind can't stop thinking of anything, and it just go on and on and on and on during the half an hour of meditation. And then the fifth one is doubt. So these are 5 unwholesome states that one need to abandon. And how the method is to contemplate in accordance with reality, or what we call the yathabhuta. Contemplate in accordance with reality the manifolds of the hindrances, understands and accepts with conviction that they are unwholesome states, ignoble, capable of harming oneself, others, and both, destroy wisdom, obstruct concentration, hinder the attainment of nirvana, do not give rise to true insight, do not lead toward awakening, and do not result in the realization of nirvana. When we talk about reality in Buddhism, we have 2 levels of reality, which is conventional and ultimate reality. So the so-called reality in the conventional level is what is true as opposed to what is not true. For instance, 1 plus 1 equals true is true, 1 plus 1 equals 3 is false. So you're looking at the screen right now and listening to the Dharma is true, right? However, here in Buddhism, it refers to the reality in the ultimate sense. And the ultimate reality relies on wisdom, not our senses. Since senses are deceptive, whatever we experience through the 6 senses, mind included, is not truly real. For example, right, when we're talking about the eye sees, do the things we see truly are the things we see? Question mark. So those with cataracts, myopia, ophthalmia kind of thing perceive the same, for example, rainbow differently, right? And if we bring in animals, the situation becomes more chaotic. Humans, dogs, eagles, and fish, when viewing the same rainbow, perceive it differently. That's from the subject's point of view, right? How about the object, the rainbow itself? The rainbow itself doesn't independently arise. It has causes and conditions that cause it to appear. So both the subject and object are not real in the ultimate sense, although they are real in the conventional sense. So the ultimate reality is what one needs to contemplate in order to get things right. Okay, and then here we have an excerpt from the Gandhari Prasana Sutra, also about the right effort. As you can see, the content or the what are the four right efforts are still the same, but the content differ. So the unwholesome states are six senses and bad thoughts. And then the wholesome states that need to be cultivated are impurity object meditation and seven enlightenment factors. And when we compare the Dharma Skanda with the Sutra, there are two things to note here. The first one is the order of the four efforts. And then the second one is the contents of the four efforts. So in Dharma Skanda, and most of the sutras other than the Gandhari Sutra, they follow the logical pattern of, if you can follow the color code there, bad, bad, good, good, or even good, good, bad, bad. It seems logical. Okay, this kind of order is helpful for memorization and oftentimes is the result of the editing process. So it really aids us to remember what we need to do to abandon unwholesome state that have unreason and that have a reason, and to arouse and maintain the wholesome states that have unreason and a reason. But in Gandhari Sutra, it has an illogical pattern of bad, good, good, bad. Who will memorize or who will order things in such way, right? So it reflects an earlier, more primitive stage before the sutras, quote unquote, standardization and editing. A lot of the time, the sutra that we read is already the result of standardization, right? Even in our daily life, we have a lot of standard thing which is not necessarily true. So what I want to say is that what is standard is not always true, and by the same token, what is not standard is not necessarily false. It's just minority or not get into the standard process. And the four quadrants of right effort is like this. Despite of their order, it must contain these four: arouse, maintain, prevent, and abandon, which can be classified into two groups according to whether they are good or bad, and whether they have a reason or unreason. For the unreason, the good must be developed and the bad must be prevented or restrained. If we set aside all the contents from the sutra and Abhidharma, we just have to remember this tendency. What is bad must be abandoned, whatever it is. It doesn't have to agree with what the texts say. And for the reason, dharmas, good or bad, the good must be maintained and the bad must be abandoned. And notice that we have the notion of unreason and a reason. Unreason means the past, the future, right? The reason dharma is from the past and present. So why do these texts have to mention about the past, present, and future? Because going back to our core notion of Sarvastivada, which is the notion of everything exists, including the three times. The three times here means past, present, and future. They exist, but I have to put a caution here. they exist not independently because they are not a single dharma like eye, ear, or eye consciousness. They exist because of their function. So it's a bit more complicated. We'll discuss it furthermore next week and next month. Okay, another excerpt from the Dharmaskanda about meditation, which you all might be very interested in. There are four kinds of cultivated concentration. What are the four? And there are four kinds with regard to their benefits or purposes, not the ontological kind. So the first one is you meditate to attain happiness in this life, or for the sake of mind, body, and spiritual health. I believe this is what a lot of people today in the modern life are looking for in terms of the benefit of meditation, right? And if we see the second function or purpose of meditation, you might seem to be detached because, oh, is this the one I'm pursuing for? So the second one is that you meditate to attain superior knowledge and vision. So it requires a deep systematic training furthermore, rather than just sitting and observing breath. The third one is that you meditate to attain higher discriminative wisdom, which is kind of a result from the vipassana. And then lastly, of course, soteriologic purpose. You meditate to attain nirvana. So which among these four is your purpose when you do meditation? I can be sure that we all agree on one thing, that our main purpose of meditation is the first one, to attain the pleasant abiding in this life, to deal with our stressful life and so on and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with it, but if you can move furthermore into the second, third, and fourth purpose of the cultivated concentration, that's going to be much more greater benefit. Okay, and then we are looking from the first book of Abhidharma, Sankiti Paryaya. It's a commentary of Sangiti Sutra. So for example, the Sangiti Sutra says, all sentient beings are sustained by food. This is on the scope of one dharma. Oftentimes, people cannot imagine what is the one dharma taught by the Buddha, but actually it is this one about food, right? Speaking of food, it's actually a very, very real, but often undermentioned kind of thing, right? A lot of people say food is not that important as long as I can eat and be full, that's enough, but that's not really the case because people not only need food, they need their quote unquote own food, right? So if you're Chinese and I ask you to eat Italian foods every single day for 30 years, you won't survive. Trust me. I'm not talking about kind of a vocation thing like once upon a time I tried Italian restaurant. I'm talking about every single day, every single meal. If you eat foods other than your own food, it's hard to survive. So this is kind of very real thing. And this is why in Buddhism, food is among one of the core or important things to survive, not just because to satisfy the body for survival, but also there are many aspects in it. Okay, and then the commentary or the Sangiti Paryaya tries to comment on what are the four foods, what are the foods. So it consists of four. The first one is edible food, which is the nutritious foods that we eat every single day, the food in general English sense. The second kind is the sense impression. This is our senses food. So for example, we are always feeding our eyes, ears, right? We want to watch TV, we want to listen to music, we want to exercise. This is the bodily food. We want to take a shower. This is also the bodily food, right? We want to get massage. This is the bodily food. And yeah, we want to use some perfume. We still want to smell something good. This is the our nose food. And then the third one is volitions, which is the wishes. I want to be this. I want to get this. Even in next life, I want to be reborn in such and such state. This is the third kind of food. And the fourth kind of food is it doesn't have any concrete example because it's always there. Our consciousness is constantly taking an object. It kind of our background survival thing, on the mental state that maintained our life unconsciously. Why? Beings in various groups, due to the foods as conditions, continue to operate through conceptualization and thus proceed through living, abiding, surviving, and sustaining. So what it basically says is that with food, one can continue living physically and mentally. Without food, one will die physically and mentally. So we are never dead both physically and mentally, although we die physically, because we never stop eating material and especially mental foods. One concrete example is that desiring to be reborn in such and such places is the third kind of food. So we never really die in the sense that we are reborn in our future lives due to the third and fourth foods. And how? Because it says edible foods that we eat every day, it sustains the body and they do not have any moral value. So no such things as the guilty food. The other three belong to minds. They have moral value. So watching TV, for example, is sensory food, the second food. Feeding the eye sense. Since the act of watching TV is usually for indulgence in nature, this food is considered unwholesome. But if watching TV for deepening the wisdom or for listening to the Dharma, it's considered wholesome. Okay, here we have Gandhari commentary example. Why do I cite Gandhari? Because Gandhari texts or manuscripts are also from the northern tradition. So they are just along the line. In the Samgiti Sutra, it says there are five faculties: faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So this kind of five faculty is not the five senses that we usually familiar with. And in the commentary, it says, what does faculty mean? It means control. The faith faculty belongs to those who have control of faith. Energy faculty, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom belongs to those who have control of those four respectively. So the commentary tries to define, explain, and elaborate. Furthermore, it says, it gives us a kind of simile. One should relate to the faith faculty as towards one's mother. So faith is like our faith towards our mother, right? Who doesn't have faith towards their parents. And then the second one is energy. It's kind of like the servant in which we have to be diligent and strive. And then the third one is mindfulness. It's like a treasure in which they watch carefully all the treasures. The concentration is like the king, and then wisdom is like a guru or teacher. And all these five faculties can be equated with an army, which they have faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And then the commentary elaborates and connects them to the framework of the three trainings, right? So We have three trainings in Buddhism: conduct division, concentration division, and wisdom division. And it looks like this in a chart. Faith connects to morality, energy and concentration to concentration, wisdom, mindfulness to wisdom. Moving on. And then it connects to the framework of the Noble Eightfold Path. So in a chart, it's gonna look like this. We have our standard Eightfold Path from right view to right concentration. And then the training representing the right view intention as wisdom, 3, 4, 5 as morality, 6, 7, 8 as concentration. This is the standard one. But our commentary, our Gandhari commentary, plugs these 5 faculties into these 2 frameworks. One thing to note is that the wisdom faculty only links to the right view, but not to the right intention. The right intention belongs to the faith faculty along with right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And then the concentration training in the 5 faculties is further divided into 3 separate faculties, in which right energy to energy, right mindfulness to mindfulness, and right concentration to concentration. So within the 5 faculty framework, it links to the 3 training framework and then to the Eightfold Path framework, making the whole system interconnected and secure like a web. So imagine if you can kind of draw a connections or links among the lessons that you've learned in EDG talks, it's going to be very, very helpful because it's going to secure what you've learned so far and not just treated them as individual talk, right? So for example, this week is my talk, and then what about next week? What about the week after? And if you can draw a connection among all these teachers and lessons, your brain, your mind, your practice is gonna very, very interdependent and secure and firm. Okay, so when we talk about 5 faculties, why should we rely on 5 faculties in terms of wisdom, faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and not the 5 senses? Eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, and even mind, because 5 senses are deceiving. The path, the spiritual faculties is reliable in order to get into the nirvana. So here I quote the Chandrakirti's introduction to the middle way. It has verses that are very beautifully spoken in terms of 5 senses are deceptive. So it says, if ordinary people were authoritative, then ordinary people would perceive reality. And if that were the case, or what use would be the states achieved by the noble ones? What would be the point of the noble path? It makes no sense to say that fools are epistemic variants. Ordinary people are not at all authoritative with respect to reality and so cannot undermine it. Right? And then moving on, in the King of Meditation Sutra, it says, the eye, ear, and nose are not epistemic variants, meaning the tools that we use to get knowledge. Neither are the tongue, body, or mind. If those senses were accurate, what would be the point of the noble path? But these sensory faculties are not epistemic instruments. They are material and are essentially neutral. Therefore, those who aspire to the path of nirvana must follow the noble path, in which we have to rely on the 5 faculties of faith and so on, instead of eye, ear, nose. So don't believe our senses, but believe our spiritual faculty. And then one last thing here. Therefore, to ascribe the status of perception to sensory cognitions and to think that those cognitions function as epistemic variants for their objects is utterly indefensible. From a mundane perspective, layperson's perspective, an epistemic variant is regarded as a non-deceptive cognition. The blessed one has thought that cognition is a conditioned phenomenon and therefore is false and deceptive, just like an illusion. Being false, deceptive, and illusory, it cannot be non-deceptive because things appear to it in a way that is different from the way they actually are. Therefore, it is not reasonable to regard such a cognition as an epistemic warrant because then all cognitions would end up being epistemic warrants. You got it? So we have the word things appear and the things actually are two different things, right? Appearance can be deceiving because of such reason. Okay, so we have 5 senses and 5 faculties. The one is descriptive, which is the senses, and the one is evaluative. If you still remember, there are these two kind of division, but both descriptive and evaluative can be used for contemplation and practice. If you look at the descriptive 5 senses, they're always there. You can use them to contemplate dukkha or suffering. They are the object of contemplation for impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. It's always there. But the 5 faculties, the faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, is a way of practice and cultivation to end suffering. So these are the path need to be actively exercised. So having said so much today, what is this thing? So we've studied there are 7 books, several compendia, and several exegesis. How do we use all of these? We are going to propose either we kind of separate things like in monolithic approach in which we adhere to a single theoretical framework one by one and stick to it, or we could do an eclectic approach in which we utilizes elements from multiple traditions, theories, or styles to gain a deeper understanding, and we mix it all together and then we eat it. Which one is the better? How should we practice within this kind of variation and stuff like that? I guess the holistic approach is the best one, in which we anchor in one tradition or one book, but also encompass various aspects of other frameworks to help us understand, to fill in the gap that we are not so sure about, right? But one thing to note here is that Buddhism is not a monotheism religion in which it doesn't have one single God. Not only that, it also doesn't have one single theoretical framework, one single unified teaching. If you try to find one single unified teaching within Buddhism, well, you'll be dissatisfied because variation, diversity within Buddhism, even contradicting to one another, is very healthy, I would say, in the studying of Buddhism. That's why we have a lot of vegetables, a lot of meat, so we can choose either one and stick to it. All right, so this is what I have for today. Before we move on to the Q&A session, let us do the transfer of merits. Join your palms together. May my merit leads to the destruction of the pollutants. May my merit be a condition for gaining nirvana. I share my portion of merits with all beings. May all of them share my portion of merits evenly. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. You?
Alrighty. You got a question in the temple? Yes.
So, first of all, Happy New Year, Venerable Samiddha. Thank you for your teaching. The very beginning, when you mentioned that Abhidharma, if I hear correctly, I just want to confirm my understanding, is Abhidharma is not the word of the Buddha. Did I hear it correctly?
Okay, I did not say whether it's the words of the Buddha or not, but we have some debate within the tradition whether one is agreeing that Abhidharma is the words of the Buddha or not. But okay, continue on. What's your question?
My question is, if it is not word of Buddha, but you are saying it's debating, then what is the main purpose for a lay person to learn Abhidharma versus more focus on the word of Buddha, which is the kind of the sutra itself, and then seeing the reality more clearly and observe using our five senses versus understanding all the theory behind the debate. And besides just the debate, if I understand correctly, there are also the counter debate to kind of defend your own debate, which is to me is counter intuitive with what the Buddha's teaching is. This is my understanding.
Okay, thank you. That's such a great question. My stance is always that I no longer try to understand what is the real words of the Buddha and what is not, because we cannot be certain what is the words or the real teachings of the Buddha. A lot of the time, this kind of notion come from, if you're doing comparative religion study, this kind of notion comes from how the Christians try to seek what is the real teaching of Jesus, right? So with the same way, we try to understand what is the real teaching or the real words of the Buddha, but it doesn't matter because we couldn't find it at all, if any, because the sutra itself, we can't say that the sutra is the real words of the Buddha. It might just resemble the real. We are talking about the real words. You know what I mean? Not. So what I'm going to say is that the words of the Buddha is not important compared to the teaching of the Buddha. So even if this teaching is not directly spoken by the Buddha, but if it agrees with the Dharma, then so what? It's still the teaching. It's still considered the words of the Buddha. So it doesn't have to be the word spoken by the very mouth, the very tongue of the Buddha. You know what I mean? Yeah, because the sutra itself is also the product of the school affiliation. We don't get the real sutra down from the teaching of the Buddha from the first council of Sangha. We're no longer having those things. So we have to pass that kind of thinking, whether Abhidharma is or not the word of the Buddha. And then we move on to your second question. Why study Abhidharma? Why not Sutra? Because a lot of the times, Sutra says things very precise, very simple, very straight up to the point, in which it requires a lot of clarification and elaboration, right? I can't think of any real concrete example for you from the sutra in which it's not so clear. So a lot of the time in sutra only says one sentence in one verse, one stanza, and that's it. But then how do we put that into practice? If we don't rely on commentary or Abhidharma for further explanation based on the experience by the previous teachers or by the authors of this Abhidharma, then who or what are we to rely on? We rely on our own understanding. We rely on our own interpretation of the sutra, which is oftentimes false and very subjective. Remember this verse that I showed you, that ordinary people were not authoritative. So we have to base on, at least, right, the Abhidharma or the sutra or whatever authoritative text that we have on hand, and then we apply it into our experience, our own practice. So that's why we need to rely on as many tools as possible for our correct understanding, and then it will lead to the correct practice of our practice. A lot of the teachers, meditation teachers nowadays, be it Mahasi, Ledi Sayadaw, and so on, their meditation practice are based on commentary, based on Abhidharma. So it agrees most of the time words for words in their teaching. So that's why we need Abhidharma. And Abhidharma isn't just about debate. Debate is just their nature because of their own experience, right? When one meditate, one might have different meditative experience, and it's not just theoretical debate. It's debate based on their own practice, so to speak. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. And then we move on to Bruce. So good to see
Yes,
you.
thank you very much. Yeah, first of all, I want to let everybody know that next Sunday we have Bekus and Tita is going to be talking about the 5 faculties that you discussed. But I have like 2 questions. One of them, I guess, is like the Northern Abhidhamma nutriments are a little different than the Theravada. But like, what percentage would you think that the Northern and Southern tradition are similar? Maybe like 50% or 75%? And then my second question is there a book that maybe describe the Northern Abhidhamma? I saw one by Venerable Professor K.L. Dhamma Jyotu. I don't know if you might know the book that might be good for that.
Yes, for your second question, that's Dharma Jyoti's, Venerable Dharma Jyoti's books are excellent. He has written books on Northern Abhidharma, which most of my contents are also basing on. Yeah, that's great. There are 2 books on Sarvastivada Abhidharma by him. And then there are also books, there are not many actually, mostly translation of Abhidharma Kosa, which you can find the English translation. And then the first question is, how many percentage? I haven't done the math yet. If you are speaking on a strict sense of the percentage, but okay, when we look at this, they are branching from the same Staviravada, so they won't get any more different, right? I would say the similarity, is going to be 70%, and only like 30% different on some notions, which we'll see next time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Who else? Who's next? Chris?
Hi, Bhante. So I just had a quick comment. We were talking about books just a second ago, and that kind of led into my comment a little bit. I've been reading a series of books by the Dalai Lama, the Library of Wisdom and Compassion. And I just want to say it is excellent and covers some really in-depth Buddhist topics, all the way from meditation and the 3 jewels and anyway, so some of the topics that you actually have discussed here today, he brings up quite a bit in one of the most recent books, the 5th volume I just finished reading, the 4th volume I just finished reading, and it is excellent. If anyone wants to really dive into the practice of Buddhism and the practice of meditation and the practice of just all aspects of the path, the books are excellent. And he has, at the end of every one of them, recommended readings that are sutras and commentaries and all of that. So just some information for everyone out there.
Yeah, thank you. And if you could type the title of the book in the chat, that would be helpful.
Sure.
And then Judy?
Hi. Thank you, Venerable, for the teaching. So actually, in our Jet Buddha temple, we have a Dharma study class that we have study and learn the Northern Abhidharma from Venerable Ru Yuan, from Canada. So he had a series of Dharma talk for each one about 1.5 hours. Sorry, and every week we watch his video, and every week we have a discussion, and every other week Venerable Ru Yuan have a Q&A with us. So we learned that for almost couple years with the Northern Abhidharma Jiserun. Actually, that's the summary of the 7 books. So for me, my impression, the difference between the Northern Abhidharma and the Southern Abhidharma, the biggest difference is the Southern Abhidharma talk about the mind process. Like the mind is 17 times faster than the body. And it went through all different mindset, nanosecond by nanosecond, what happened when your eye sees something, and what happened in your mind, started to thinking all the mind nanosecond about the mind process. And I don't see that in Northern Abhidharma. So for me, that's the biggest difference. And they both has a very comprehensive and very detailed and complicated a study about mind and mindset and consciousness, and even the form, material things. So that's my impression. What do you think about that?
Yeah, thank you. That's nice. So Judy is studying this one, Kosa Bhasha, right?
Kosha Basha.
That's great. But remember, if you look at this thing, you have an opponent, right? You have Nyaya Nusara behind. If you read that furthermore, a lot of the time it doesn't agree with Abhidharma Kosa. Yeah, but okay. And then we move on to...
But what do you think about the differences? Is that what the main difference? The Southern one talk about the mind process, but I don't see that.
About the mind process, we do have that in the Theravada tradition as well. Yes.
No, I say we saw it in the Southern, in the Theravada, but I don't see that much mind processing in the Northern.
Yeah, we do have the mind process in the Northern as well.
Oh,
yeah, we'll cover that next time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Fang?
Thank you, Bante, for teaching. I have a question, this kind of novice question, because you were talking about everything exists. This is the major difference, I guess, is from Southern tradition, which is, quite distinct from the emptiness. Is it possible you can elaborate a little bit on everything exists? You mentioned by function, so I'm just wondering, is this temporary by function, or it's existing eternally?
Okay. Yeah, so the Southern tradition also propose everything exists, so it's different from Mahayana or from Mahasangika, not the Southern Northern. The Southern Northern are basically the same on everything exists. So what is exists here is the single dharma, all right? Not time. So the time exists because the dharma exists. That's what I'm saying. And if you want to know a more clearer explanation, you'll have to wait until next month, because that's what we are going to talk about. We are going to focus on the great compendium, right? And we are going to talk about this notion of what is everything exists means. Yeah.
Are you going to elaborate more in the future courses about consciousness? I'm actually quite interested on the 7th book you mentioned. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I haven't given it a thought. Maybe I can consider it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
that's
you.
a great suggestion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have a question in the chat from
Oh,
Brian.
yeah.
How would you define faith in the context of the 5 faculties?
Yeah, so in a simpler term, this faith right here, it means, okay, faith in Buddhism, if we explain it within the tradition, it means faith towards the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So faith towards the triple gems or triple jewels. And the faith that we have in Buddhism is unlike other religions in which it requires understanding before we believe something. So we need to have the pre-understanding of a concept and then believe in it. And then as you believe in it, you practice and you believe in it. And then finally, you gain the result of your practice. That's the real faith that we are talking about. So we have a series of spectrum of faith from the pre-faith, pre-understanding, and then faith and understanding, and then post-understanding, and then that's the real faith. So the faith in Buddhism comes from the real understanding and not just blind faith. Yeah.
Thank you for that explanation.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions in the temple? Any other questions online?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I was just looking over the 5 faculties. They're a little bit different than the ones in Theravada. Are these just differences in words, or are they actually different in meaning?
What do you see in the Theravada?
Faith, energy, wisdom, mindfulness, and concentration. And
Yeah, isn't that the same? You mean the meaning or the?
yeah, are they actually the same?
Yes.
Oh, they are. All right. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Okay. That's all. Appreciate it.
Okay. Nice. So we are done for today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. If everybody will please stand, we'll do our 3 vows out. 3 vows to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. One vow to our speaker today, Venerable Samiddha. Thank you all very much.